Welcome to WiserReads, the place where books meet wisdom and where you walk away smarter with every video. If you're passionate about learning from the world's greatest thinkers, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new summary. Today we're exploring a book that has reshaped the way millions of people think about, well, thinking itself. It's Thinking, Fast and Slow by Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman, a fascinating deep dive into how our minds work, why we make the choices we do, and how we can avoid the invisible traps of flawed decision-making. Kahneman explains that our brain uses two systems to process information. System 1 is quick, intuitive, and effortless. It helps us make snap decisions and react instantly. System 2, in contrast, is slower, logical, and deliberate. It kicks in when we carefully solve problems or analyze complex situations. Both systems are essential, but here's the catch. System 1 often misleads us with biases and errors, while System 2, though more accurate, can be lazy and doesn't always intervene. This book shows us why we sometimes overestimate our knowledge, misjudge risks, or remember experiences differently from how we live them. Most importantly, it gives us the tools to recognize these mental shortcuts and think more wisely in everyday life. So stick around because in this video, we'll break down the key lessons of thinking fast and slow in a way that's practical, insightful, and easy to apply. And if you enjoy growing wiser with every read, don't forget to subscribe to WiserReads. Your journey to smarter thinking starts right here.
Part 1. Two Systems. The Characters of the Story. In the opening chapter, The Characters of the Story, Daniel Kahneman introduces the two central systems of the mind that shape human thought, System 1 and System 2. These characters serve as the foundation for understanding how we think, decide, and act. System 1 operates automatically and quickly, with little or no effort. It's intuitive, emotional, and constantly at work, generating impressions, feelings, and instincts. It's responsible for our immediate reactions, like recognizing faces, completing familiar patterns, or responding to danger without conscious thought. While efficient, System 1 is prone to errors and cognitive biases because it relies on shortcuts and associations rather than deliberate reasoning. System 2, in contrast, is deliberate, logical, and effortful. It engages when we need to focus, solve complex problems, or override automatic responses. System 2 monitors and corrects the impulses of System 1, but requires attention and energy to function effectively. Because it's lazy by nature, System 2 often defers to the faster System 1, leaving many decisions influenced by intuition rather than reason. Kahneman explains that the interaction between these systems governs virtually every judgment we make, from daily choices to life-changing decisions. System 1 provides speed and efficiency, while System 2 provides rationality and control, but the balance between them is delicate and often imperfect. By understanding these two systems, readers gain insight into why people often make predictable mistakes, misjudge probabilities, or fall for cognitive illusions. Recognizing the characters of our own minds is the first step towards better decision-making, critical thinking, and self-awareness, a theme that resonates throughout the rest of the book.
Attention and effort. In Attention and Effort, Daniel Kahneman explores how mental energy is allocated and how our mind balances automatic and deliberate thinking. System 2, the slower analytical part of the brain, requires attention and effort to operate, unlike System 1, which runs automatically. Because attention is a limited resource, System 2 cannot remain fully engaged all the time. Kahneman explains that tasks requiring concentration, complex calculations, or self-control demand significant mental effort. When System 2 is activated, it can override automatic impulses from System 1, but doing so is tiring, and people naturally seek to minimize cognitive effort. This explains why we often rely on intuition, habits, or mental shortcuts, even when a more careful analysis would lead to better decisions. The chapter also introduces the concept of cognitive strain, where effortful thinking feels uncomfortable, leading us to conserve mental energy whenever possible. Kahneman emphasizes that understanding the interplay between attention and effort helps us recognize the limits of rational thinking and why errors occur even in well-informed individuals. Ultimately, attention and effort highlights the importance of conscious focus, deliberate thinking, and awareness of our mental limitations, laying the groundwork for understanding biases, decision-making errors, and the need to train our minds for better judgment.
The lazy controller. In The Lazy Controller, Daniel Kahneman explains that System 2, the analytical and deliberate part of our mind, is inherently lazy. While it has the power to monitor, control, and override the quick, intuitive responses of System 1, it often avoids doing so unless absolutely necessary. This mental laziness helps conserve energy, but also leaves us vulnerable to biases, snap judgments, and errors. Because System 2 requires effort to engage, people frequently rely on intuition, habits, or simple rules of thumb, even when more careful thinking would improve outcomes. Kahneman highlights that understanding this tendency is key to improving decision-making. By recognizing when System 2 is needed and deliberately engaging it, we can counteract the shortcuts of System 1, reduce mistakes, and make more rational, thoughtful choices in both everyday life and complex situations.
The associative machine. In The Associative Machine, Daniel Kahneman describes how System 1 constantly generates impressions, ideas, and feelings by linking new information with what we already know. This automatic process forms an associative network in the brain, where one thought triggers another, often without conscious awareness. System 1's associative thinking is fast and effortless, helping us recognize patterns, make predictions, and navigate daily life efficiently. However, it can also lead to errors, as associations may be influenced by irrelevant or misleading cues. For example, exposure to certain words, images, or contexts can unconsciously shape our judgments and decisions. Kahneman emphasizes that understanding the brain's associative machinery helps explain why people often jump to conclusions, form impressions too quickly, or fall for cognitive illusions. By recognizing the automatic nature of System 1, we can become more mindful of its influence and better engage System 2 when careful reasoning is needed.
Part 2. Heuristics and Biases. The Law of Small Numbers. In The Law of Small Numbers, Daniel Kahneman explains a common cognitive bias. People often overestimate the reliability of small samples. While statistics teaches that larger samples provide more accurate estimates, our intuition, driven by System 1, tends to treat small samples as if they perfectly represent the population. This bias leads to errors in judgment, such as overinterpreting patterns in limited data, believing unlikely streaks are meaningful, or drawing broad conclusions from too few observations. Investors, managers, and everyday decision-makers are especially prone to these mistakes. Kahneman highlights that awareness of this bias is crucial for better reasoning. By recognizing that small numbers are inherently noisy and unreliable, we can avoid overconfidence, question apparent patterns, and make more informed, cautious decisions, especially in situations involving risk or probability.
Anchors. In Anchors, Daniel Kahneman explores how System 1 relies on initial information, known as anchors, to make judgments and estimates, often without conscious awareness. An anchor can be any reference point, such as a number suggested in a question or a first impression, which subtly influences subsequent decisions. Kahneman demonstrates that even irrelevant anchors can shape our thinking, affecting everything from pricing, negotiations, and estimations to everyday choices. People often adjust away from the anchor too little, resulting in biased judgments. The chapter highlights the power of unconscious influence. Our minds automatically connect new information to anchors, making objective reasoning difficult. Recognizing the effect of anchors allows us to engage System 2 deliberately, question initial reference points, and make more rational, thoughtful decisions.
The science of availability. In The Science of Availability, Daniel Kahneman explains how System 1 judges the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. This availability heuristic makes us overestimate rare but memorable events, like plane crashes or lottery wins, while underestimating common but less vivid occurrences. The ease with which we recall information is influenced by factors like recent exposure, emotional impact, or media coverage, not actual probability. As a result, decisions and judgments can be skewed, leading to misperceptions of risk, probability, and frequency. Kahneman emphasizes that awareness of this bias is essential for better reasoning. By recognizing that what is memorable is not always representative, we can engage System 2 to check our intuitions, make more accurate assessments, and avoid costly mistakes in personal, professional, and societal decision-making.
Availability, emotion, and risk. In Availability, Emotion, and Risk, Daniel Kahneman explores how emotions and vivid memories distort our perception of risk. Events that are dramatic, recent, or emotionally charged are easier to recall, making them seem more likely than they actually are. This is a continuation of the availability heuristic, where ease of recall drives judgments about frequency and probability. Kahneman shows that fear, worry, or personal experience can amplify these effects. For example, people often overestimate rare but sensational risks like plane crashes, while underestimating common dangers like car accidents. This emotional bias can influence decisions in finance, health, and public policy. By understanding how emotion interacts with memory, we can better recognize our mental shortcuts and engage System 2 to correct misjudgments. Awareness of these influences is crucial for making rational and informed choices, rather than reacting to emotionally salient but statistically unlikely events.
Part 3. Overconfidence. The Illusion of Understanding. In The Illusion of Understanding, Daniel Kahneman examines why people often believe they understand past events better than they truly do. This illusion stems from System 1, which constructs coherent narratives by connecting facts and patterns, even when the underlying causes are uncertain or complex. We tend to underestimate randomness and overestimate predictability, believing that events were obvious in hindsight. This cognitive bias fuels overconfidence in experts, policymakers, and individuals, leading them to trust narratives that oversimplify reality. Kahneman emphasizes that acknowledging the limits of our knowledge is essential for better decision-making. By recognizing the illusion of understanding, we can avoid false certainty, question assumptions, and engage System 2 to analyze situations more critically. This awareness helps reduce errors in judgment and encourages humility when predicting future outcomes in uncertain and complex environments.
The illusion of validity. In The Illusion of Validity, Daniel Kahneman explores how people overestimate the accuracy of their predictions and judgments, even when evidence is limited or unreliable. This bias is fueled by System 1, which creates coherent stories and patterns that feel convincing, giving a false sense of confidence. Kahneman illustrates that experts, too, are prone to this illusion. Even when their predictions are consistent with past patterns, they may ignore randomness and overvalue superficial signs of skill or knowledge. As a result, we often trust intuition or experience more than objective data warrants. The chapter highlights the importance of skepticism and statistical thinking. By recognizing the limits of our predictive abilities, engaging System 2, and relying on evidence rather than intuition alone, we can reduce overconfidence, avoid costly mistakes, and make more rational decisions in uncertain or complex situations. Intuitions versus formulas. In Intuitions versus Formulas, Daniel Kahneman examines the striking difference between human judgment and simple statistical formulas in predicting outcomes. While experts often rely on intuition, experience, or gut feelings, research shows that formulas consistently outperform human judgment, even when they appear basic or crude. Kahneman explains that intuitive predictions are influenced by biases, noise, and overconfidence, whereas formulas apply consistent rules, reducing error and variability. For example, a simple weighted algorithm can better predict academic performance, job success, or clinical outcomes than expert opinion. The chapter emphasizes that recognizing the limitations of intuition is crucial. By relying on formulas for repetitive, predictable decisions and reserving human judgment for unique, complex situations, we can improve accuracy, reduce bias, and make better choices. This reinforces the book's broader lesson. System 2 should guide System 1 when precision matters.
Expert intuition. When can we trust it? In Expert Intuition, When Can We Trust It?, Daniel Kahneman explores the conditions under which expert intuition is reliable. He explains that intuition can be trusted only in environments that are regular, predictable, and where experts have received extensive practice with immediate feedback. Chess masters or firefighters, for instance, develop accurate instincts through repeated exposure to consistent patterns. However, in uncertain or highly variable environments, such as stock markets, economic forecasting, or medical diagnoses without clear feedback, intuitive judgments are often flawed. Overconfidence in such contexts can lead to serious errors. Kahneman emphasizes the importance of recognizing when intuition is appropriate and when it is not. By combining expert insight with evidence-based methods, checklists, and statistical reasoning, we can harness the value of intuition while avoiding its pitfalls. This balance between System 1 and System 2 is central to sound decision-making.
Part 4. Choices. Bernoulli's Errors. In Bernoulli's Errors, Daniel Kahneman examines the limitations of the traditional economic model of decision-making based on expected utility theory introduced by Daniel Bernoulli. According to this model, people make rational choices by weighing outcomes according to their probabilities and personal value, assuming consistent preferences. Kahneman explains that in reality, human behavior often deviates from this model. People do not experience gains and losses linearly. Instead, they are highly sensitive to losses, a phenomenon called loss aversion. Additionally, people evaluate outcomes relative to reference points rather than absolute values, which can lead to risk-seeking or risk-averse behavior depending on context. This chapter lays the foundation for prospect theory, showing that our intuitive judgments about risk and reward are shaped by psychological factors rather than purely mathematical calculations. Understanding these errors helps explain why people make choices that seem irrational under classical economic theory.
Prospect theory. In prospect theory, Daniel Kahneman, along with Amos Tversky, presents a groundbreaking alternative to classical economic models of decision-making. Unlike expected utility theory, prospect theory accounts for how people actually perceive gains and losses. The theory reveals that individuals are loss-averse. Losses feel significantly more painful than equivalent gains feel pleasurable. People also evaluate outcomes relative to a reference point rather than in absolute terms, which can lead to risk-seeking behavior when facing potential losses and risk aversion when facing potential gains. Prospect theory explains many real-world behaviors that traditional models cannot, such as why people hold on to losing investments, avoid certain risks, or make inconsistent choices under uncertainty. By incorporating psychological insights into decision-making, the theory shows how System 1 biases influence our judgments and highlights the need to engage System 2 for more rational evaluation of risks and rewards.
The endowment effect. In the endowment effect, Daniel Kahneman explains how people value what they own more than identical items they do not own. This cognitive bias leads to a discrepancy between buying and selling prices. Individuals often demand much more to give up an item than they would be willing to pay to acquire it. The effect stems from loss aversion, a core principle of prospect theory, where losses feel more significant than equivalent gains. Ownership triggers a sense of personal attachment, making the prospect of giving up an item psychologically painful. This bias influences everyday decisions, from pricing personal possessions to financial investments, and can result in suboptimal choices, like holding on to losing assets or overvaluing trivial items. By understanding the endowment effect, we can better recognize emotional influences on our decisions, engage System 2, and make more rational evaluations when buying, selling, or trading possessions.
Bad events. In Bad Events, Daniel Kahneman examines how humans respond more strongly to negative experiences than to positive ones. This loss aversion means that pain from losses, failures, or setbacks is felt more intensely than pleasure from comparable gains. The chapter highlights how this bias affects decision-making in finance, health, and daily life. People tend to avoid risks that might lead to losses, overreact to negative news, and sometimes hold on to bad investments or relationships out of fear of further loss. Even minor negative events can disproportionately influence our perceptions and choices. Kahneman emphasizes that awareness of this asymmetry is crucial. By recognizing how strongly we react to bad events, we can engage System 2 to evaluate situations more objectively, mitigate overreactions, and make decisions that balance potential gains and losses more rationally. Part 5. Two Selves. In Two Selves, Daniel Kahneman distinguishes between the experiencing self and the remembering self. The experiencing self lives in the present, sensing emotions and events as they happen, while the remembering self evaluates and recalls experiences, forming narratives that influence future decisions. Kahneman explains that our memories are often biased, emphasizing peaks and endings of experiences rather than their overall duration.
This can lead to choices that favor how we will remember events rather than how we actually experience them. For instance, we might endure discomfort in the short term if it results in a more satisfying story to recall later. Understanding the two selves is crucial for better decision-making, happiness, and life planning. By recognizing the gap between lived experiences and memories, we can align choices more closely with both real-time well-being and long-term satisfaction.
Life as a story. In Life as a Story, Daniel Kahneman explains how the remembering self interprets our experiences by creating coherent narratives. Unlike the experiencing self, which lives moment to moment, the remembering self focuses on meaning, peaks, and endings, shaping how we evaluate past events. Kahneman highlights that people often judge their lives based on these stories rather than the total sum of experiences. Dramatic moments, significant turning points, or memorable conclusions weigh more heavily than prolonged periods of neutral or moderate experiences. This narrative bias influences decisions, future planning, and perceptions of happiness. Understanding life as a story allows us to recognize the difference between living well and remembering well. By being aware of this distinction, we can make choices that improve actual experiences while also shaping the memories and narratives that define our sense of fulfillment.
Experienced well-being. In Experienced Well-Being, Daniel Kahneman examines how people actually feel in the moment, as opposed to how they remember or evaluate their lives. The experiencing self captures real-time pleasure, pain, and satisfaction, while the remembering self often distorts these experiences when recalling them later. Kahneman highlights that happiness is influenced by daily activities, attention, and engagement, and not just by major life events. Even brief, positive moments, like a good conversation or enjoyable task, can significantly enhance experienced well-being. Conversely, negative moments are amplified by attention and emotional intensity. Understanding the distinction between experienced and remembered well-being helps us make choices that improve day-to-day life rather than focusing solely on creating memorable narratives. By paying attention to actual experiences, we can design routines, relationships, and activities that enhance genuine happiness and satisfaction in the present.
Thinking about life. In Thinking about Life, Daniel Kahneman explores how people evaluate their lives when reflecting on the past or planning for the future. Unlike the experiencing self, which lives in the present moment, the remembering self assesses life through memories, narratives, and comparisons, often emphasizing peaks, endings, and significant events. Kahneman shows that our judgments about life satisfaction are influenced more by these recollections than by day-to-day experiences. People may report high life satisfaction, even if much of their daily experience is neutral or stressful, simply because of positive memories or favorable comparisons. By understanding the difference between experiencing and remembering selves, we can make better life decisions, balancing immediate well-being with the stories we want to remember. This insight helps align choices, habits, and priorities to improve both our present experiences and reflections on life.
If you've listened to this summary of Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, you now have a clear view of how our minds really work. Kahneman shows us that human thinking is guided by two systems, the fast, intuitive, and emotional System 1, and the slow, deliberate, and logical System 2. While System 1 helps us make quick decisions, it is prone to biases and errors. System 2 can correct these mistakes, but it requires effort and attention. The book highlights common mental traps like overconfidence, loss aversion, and the influence of vivid memories that shape our judgments and decisions. Kahneman also introduces us to the fascinating distinction between the experiencing self and the remembering self, showing how our perception of happiness is often more about memories than the reality of our daily lives. By understanding these insights, you can make better decisions, avoid predictable mistakes, and improve both your daily experiences and long-term satisfaction. If you enjoyed this summary, make sure to subscribe to WiserReads for more book insights that help you think smarter, live wiser, and grow every day.